In the foggy heart of London, a priceless treasure map vanishes, and an explorer lies wounded. 4 suspects, a cunning guide, an ambitious partner, a wealthy funder, and a bitter rival, each hide secrets as deep as the Pacific island where the map was found. Enter Miss Jane Marple, whose gentle demeanour masks a razor-sharp mind. A smudge of red clay, a picked lock, and a daring trap unravel a tale of greed and betrayal, proving no secret escapes her quiet gaze. Chapter 1. The Call to St. Mary Mead. In the tranquil village of St. Mary Mead, where the seasons turned with the gentle predictability of a well-kept garden, Miss Jane Marple sat in her cosy drawing-room, her knitting needles moving with the quiet rhythm of a metronome. The late afternoon sun filtered through lace curtains, casting delicate patterns on the polished oak table, where a single letter lay, its crisp envelope bearing the bold handwriting of Sir Henry Clithering. Miss Marple, her silver hair neatly pinned and her blue eyes sharp behind her spectacles, paused her work, a half-finished scarf for the vicar's wife, and reached for the letter. Sir Henry, a retired Scotland Yard commissioner and an old friend, had a habit of stirring her curiosity with tales of intrigue, and this missive promised no less. The letter was brief, but urgent. Sir Henry was in London, consulting for a private firm that handled matters too delicate for official channels. An explorer, Captain Reginald Thorne, had met with misfortune. A vicious attack in his hotel room had left him injured, and a treasure map of considerable value had vanished. "The police are baffled, Jane," Sir Henry wrote, "but you have a way of seeing what others overlook. Your insight would be invaluable." Miss Marple's lips curved into a faint smile. She had no grand illusions about her abilities, only a quiet confidence in her understanding of human nature, honed by years of observing the small dramas of village life. A theft, an assault, a map leading to untold riches. It was, she thought, not unlike the time Mrs. Clement's silver teapot went missing, only to be found in the curate's attic. She rose, her movements deliberate, and crossed to the window, where the roses in her garden nodded under a gentle breeze. St. Mary Mead was a world away from London's bustle, yet its petty jealousies and hidden motives were, she knew, a microcosm of the wider world. The explorer's case intrigued her, not for the promise of treasure, but for the puzzle of who might betray a man like Captain Thorne. Sir Henry's letter mentioned 4 suspects: a guide, a partner, a funder, and a rival. Each, she mused, would have their own reasons, their own secrets, much like the villagers who gossiped at the post office or whispered in the church pews. Miss Marple returned to her chair, her mind already turning over possibilities. She thought of young Tommy Pierce, who'd once stolen apples from her orchard, his guilt betrayed by a feudy, telltale smudge of juice on his chin. People, she reflected, were not so different, whether in St. Mary Mead or the far reaches of the globe. Greed, envy, fear, these were the threads that wove most crimes together. She opened a small drawer in her writing desk and retrieved a notepad, jotting down the names Sir Henry had provided. The guide, Tom Harrow, might know the map's secrets from their travels. The partner, Edward Vance, stood to gain or lose by their shared venture. The funder, Lady Beatrice Worthington, had wealth, but perhaps craved more. And the rival, Dr. Clara Mortimer, might harbour a grudge as sharp as any village feud. The clock on the mantel chimed 5, and Miss Marple set her knitting aside. She would need to pack lightly. her black handbag, a few sensible dresses, and her sturdiest shoes. London, with its noise and haste, was not her natural habitat, but she welcomed the challenge. Sir Henry had promised to meet her at Paddington Station tomorrow morning, and she trusted his judgment in matters of crime, just as he trusted hers in matters of character. She rang for her maid Lily, a cheerful girl whose cousin had once been caught pilfering from the village shop, and instructed her to prepare a suitcase. As twilight settled over St. Mary Mead, Miss Marple stood at her garden gate, gazing at the quiet cottages and the church spire piercing the sky. The world beyond might be vast and wild, with its explorers and treasures, but human nature remained constant. She would go to London, meet this Captain Thorne, and unravel the truth behind the vanished map. With a final glance at her roses, she turned back to the house, her mind as clear and sharp as the evening air, ready to face the mystery that awaited. Chapter 2. The Explorer's Tale. The train from St. Mary Mead had deposited Miss Jane Marple at Paddington Station with the punctuality she so admired in the Great Western Railway. And now, as she stepped into the bustling heart of London, she felt the familiar jolt of a world far removed from her quiet village. The air was thick with the clamour of porters, the clatter of taxis, and the sharp tang of coal smoke. But Miss Marple's composure remained unshaken. Her small, neat figure, clad in a sensible black coat and a hat adorned with a single feather, moved with purpose through the crowd. Sir Henry Clithering, true to his word, awaited her on the platform. His tall frame and distinguished bearing unmistakable even amidst the throng. His eyes lit with warmth as he spotted her, and he extended a hand with the gallantry of an old friend. "Jane, my dear," he said, taking her modest suitcase, "you've come just in time. This business with Captain Thorne is a tangle, and I'm counting on your sharp eyes to unravel it." Miss Marple smiled faintly, her blue eyes twinkling behind her spectacles. "You flatter me, Henry, but I shall do my best. Now, tell me about this explorer and his map." Sir Henry guided her to a waiting car, a sleek black Daimler that seemed to Miss Marple a touch ostentatious for a retired commissioner, though she supposed his new consulting work demanded such trappings. As they settled into the plush seats, he began to outline the case, his voice low and measured, as if wary of eavesdroppers, even in the privacy of the vehicle. "Captain Reginald Thorne," he began, "is a man of some renown in adventuring circles. 42, former naval officer, turned explorer after the war. He's led expeditions to the Congo, the Andes, and most recently a remote island in the Pacific, somewhere near the Solomons, though he's cagey about the precise location. Claims he found a map there, tucked in a sea chest buried under volcanic ash. It's said to lead to a pirate horde. Gold, jewels, the usual romantic stuff, but worth a fortune if true. He brought it back to London, intending to mount a new expedition, but 3 nights ago someone attacked him in his hotel room, left him with a cracked rib and a nasty gash on his arm. Worse, the map's gone." Miss Marple listened intently, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "And the police?" she asked, her tone mild but probing. "Stumped," Sir Henry admitted. "No fingerprints, no witnesses, just a broken window and a room turned upside down. The hotel staff saw nothing, or so they claim. Thorne's convinced it's one of 4 people. His guide, Tom Harrow, his business partner, Edward Vance, his financial backer, Lady Beatrice Worthington, or a rival, Dr. Clara Mortimer. He's waiting for us now at my office. I thought you'd want to hear his story firsthand." Miss Marple nodded, her mind already turning over the names, each a thread in the tapestry of suspicion. A guide, a partner, a funder, a rival. Each role suggested its own motives, its own opportunities. She thought of St. Mary Mead, where the postmaster's assistant had once pilfered letters for profit, and the vicar's sister had harboured a grudge over a lost baking contest. People, she knew, were much the same wherever one went, their desires and deceits merely dressed in different costumes. The car pulled up before a discreet office building in Bloomsbury, its Georgian facade a quiet contrast to the city's clamour. Sir Henry led her to a second-floor office, where a man rose from a leather armchair to greet them. Captain Reginald Thorne was a figure cut from the cloth of adventure tales. Tall, broad-shouldered, with a weathered face that spoke of sun and salt. His dark hair was streaked with grey, and his right arm rested in a sling, the bandage visible beneath his rolled-up sleeve. His eyes, a piercing hazel, held a mix of defiance and weariness, and Miss Marple noted the way his left hand twitched, as if accustomed to gripping a compass or a rope. "Miss Marple," Sir Henry said, "this is Captain Thorne." Captain, Miss Marple, is a friend whose judgment I trust implicitly. Thorne inclined his head. Jean's expression sceptical but polite. "A pleasure, ma'am," he said, his voice roughened by years of shouting orders over storms. "Though I confess, I'm not sure what a lady like yourself can do about my troubles." Miss Marple smiled, unruffled. "I find, Captain, that troubles are often clearer when viewed from a distance. Perhaps you'd tell me your story, exactly as it happened?" They settled around a mahogany table, Sir Henry pouring tea from a silver pot, while Thorne began his tale. His voice, though strained, carried the cadence of a man used to commanding attention. "It was 6 months ago," he said, "that I set out for the Pacific. A speck of an island, barely on the charts, but I'd heard whispers of a wreck, a pirate ship sunk in the 18th century. Tom Harrow, my guide, knew the waters better than anyone. We spent weeks battling storms and reefs, but we found it. A chest, half buried in ash, with a map inside. Parchment, brittle as bone, but the markings were clear. Directions to a hoard hidden on another island, not far off. I brought it back to London, locked in my satchel, and kept it close. Only 4 people knew I had it. Harrow, who was with me. Edward Vance, my partner, who's been in on my ventures for years. Lady Beatrice Worthington, who funded the trip. And Dr. Clara Mortimer, who'd been sniffing around my research for months." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her eyes never leaving Thorne's face. She noted the way he lingered on Vance's name, his jaw tightening almost imperceptibly. "And the night of the theft," she prompted gently. Thorne's gaze darkened. 3 nights ago, I was at the Anchor Hotel, near the docks. Modest place, but I like to keep a low profile. I'd locked the map in a strongbox under my bed. Around midnight, I heard a noise, a creak like someone stepping on a loose board. Before I could get up, someone rushed me. Dark figure, face covered. I fought back, but they were quick, clubbed my arm, cracked a rib. I must have blacked out for a moment. When I came to, the room was a mess, the strongbox open and the map gone. Whoever it was climbed out the window, 2nd floor, mind you, and vanished. Miss Marple's fingers traced the rim of her teacup, her mind cataloguing details. "The strongbox," she said. "Was it forced open?" "No," Thorne replied, his brow furrowing. "That's the odd thing. The lock was picked clean as you like. Whoever did it knew what they were doing." "And you suspect these four because they knew of the map?" she asked. Thorn nodded. "Harrow was loyal out there, but he's a rough sort. Knows his way around locks, I'd wager. Vance has been pushing to speed up the next expedition, always talking about the money. Lady Beatrice put up a fortune for the trip. She's not the sort to take losses lightly. And Mortimer, well, she's been dogging my steps for years, jealous of my finds. Any one of them could have wanted. That map Miss Marple leaned back, her expression serene, but her mind racing. The story was vivid, yet she sensed gaps, things unsaid, perhaps deliberately. Thorn's guarded tone when mentioning Vance reminded her of Mr. Hargreaves, a saint, Marymead farmer, who'd once concealed a debt from his brother. "Tell me, Captain," she said, her voice soft, "did you show the map to anyone in London?" Thorn hesitated, his eyes flicking to Sir Henry before returning to her. "No," he said, "I kept it locked away. Didn't trust anyone, not even Vance, though he kept asking to see it." Sir Henry raised an eyebrow. "Not even your partner?" Thorn's mouth tightened. "Edward's got a head for business, but he's ambitious. Always talking about bigger stakes, bigger rewards. I figured the less he handled the map, the better." Miss Marple nodded, her thoughts drifting to a village shopkeeper who'd once hidden his ledgers from a nosy partner. Ambition, she knew, could twist loyalty into betrayal. And the island, she said. You mentioned volcanic ash. Was there anything distinctive about the place? Its soil, perhaps? Thorn looked surprised. "Red clay, mostly. Sticky stuff, clings to your boots. Why do you ask?" "Oh, just a passing thought," Miss Marple said, her smile disarming. But her mind noted the detail, filing it away like a scrap of gossip from the village tea shop. Red clay, she thought, was not so common in London streets. It might prove significant, much like the mud on young Billy's shoes had once betrayed his trespassing in her garden. Sir Henry leaned forward. "Jane, what do you make of it? Any thoughts on where to start?" Miss Marple set her teacup down, her movements precise. "I think, Henry, that I should like to meet these 4 individuals. People reveal themselves in conversation, you know, just as they do in a village. Captain Thorn, would you object if I spoke to them?" Thorn shrugged, wincing slightly as his injured arm shifted. "Go ahead, Miss Marple, but don't expect them to confess. They're a cagey lot." "I rarely expect confessions," she replied, her tone mild, "but I find that people often say more than they intend." Sir Henry chuckled. "That's why I called you, Jane. I'll arrange meetings with each of them. Where would you like to start?" Miss Marple considered, her mind sifting through the suspects like a gardener sorting seeds. Harrow, the guide, might know the map's secrets from their travels. Vance, the partner, seemed to chafe under Thorn's caution. Lady Beatrice, the funder, had wealth but perhaps craved glory. And Dr. Mortimer, the rival, carried the weight of envy. "Let us begin with Mr. Harrow," she said. "A guide sees much, and I should like to know what he saw." Sir Henry nodded, making a note. "I'll have him meet you tomorrow at a cafe near the hotel. Neutral ground, I think." As they rose, Miss Marple glanced at Thorn, who stood by the window, staring out at the grey London skyline. His posture, she thought, was that of a man who'd faced storms and jungles, but was less certain of the treachery closer to home. She thanked him for his time, her voice gentle, and followed Sir Henry to the door. Outside, the city hummed with life, but Miss Marple's thoughts were elsewhere, piecing together the fragments of Thorn's tale. The map, the attack, the red clay, all were clues, like the scattered petals of a flower she'd once traced to a thief in St. Mary Mead. She would need to tread carefully, for this puzzle, like all puzzles, would yield its secrets only to a patient hand. The office door closed behind her, and as Sir Henry escorted her to a guest room in his Bloomsbury lodgings, Miss Marple's mind continued its quiet work. The explorer's tale was only the beginning, she knew, and the truth lay hidden in the shadows of those 4 names. Tomorrow, she would begin to draw them into the light. Chapter 3. The Guide's Account. The morning sun struggled through London's fog, casting a muted glow over the narrow street where Miss Jane Marple sat at a corner table in the Rose and Crown Café, a modest establishment near the docks. The café, with its chipped teacups and the faint scent of fried bacon, was a far cry from the polished drawing-rooms of St. Mary Mead, but Miss Marple found its unpretentious air oddly comforting. It reminded her of Mrs. Baker's tea shop, where village gossip flowed as freely as the tea. She adjusted her hat, a sensible creation with a single violet ribbon, and sipped her Earl Grey, her eyes scanning the room for Tom Harrow, Captain Thorne's guide. Sir Henry Clithering had arranged the meeting, assuring her that Harrow would be prompt. "He's a rough sort," Sir Henry had warned, "but he knows the wilds like you know your garden." Miss Marple had smiled at the comparison, for she knew that gardens like jungles held their secrets, hidden roots and unexpected thorns. She had dressed plainly, her black coat and gloves blending with the café's sombre clientele, but her sharp blue eyes missed nothing. The waitress, a tired woman with a limp, shuffled past. A docker at the counter argued over his bill, and a clock above the door ticked with a rhythm that seemed to count the seconds until Harrow's arrival. At precisely 10 o'clock, the door swung open, admitting a wiry man in his late 30s, his face tanned to the hue of old leather. Tom Harrow wore a faded tweed jacket, its elbows patched, and boots that bore the scuffs of distant trails. His eyes, a wary grey, darted across the room before settling on Miss Marple. He approached with a hesitant gait, as if unaccustomed to such civilized settings, and removed a battered cap, revealing close-cropped hair streaked with dust. "Miss Marple?" he asked, his voice low and gravelly, with a trace of a West Country burr. "Sir Henry said you wanted a—" "Word indeed, Mr. Harrow," she replied, her tone warm but measured. "Do sit down. Would you care for tea? Or perhaps something stronger?" He shook his head, settling into the chair opposite her with the caution of a man expecting a trap. "Tea's fine," he muttered, though his fingers drummed on the table, betraying a restlessness Miss Marple noted at once. It was, she thought, not unlike the fidgeting of young Jimmy, the St. Mary Mead poacher, when questioned about missing pheasants. The waitress brought a fresh pot, and Miss Marple poured, her movements precise and unhurried. "I understand you were Captain Thorne's guide on his Pacific expedition," she began, her voice soft as if discussing the weather. "It must have been quite an adventure." Harrow's shoulders relaxed slightly, but his eyes remained guarded. "Aye, it was that. Storms, reefs, jungles thicker than a London fog. Thorne's a hard man to keep up with, always pushing, never resting. But we found what he was after." "Oh, the map," Miss Marple said, her tone encouraging. "Tell me about it, if you would." Harrow leaned back, his fingers stilling. "Not much to tell. We were on this speck of an island, barely a dot on the chart. Volcanic, all ash and red clay that stuck to everything. Thorn had a lead about a wreck, some pirate ship from centuries back. We dug for days, nearly gave up, but then we found it. A chest, half rotted, buried under a cliff. Inside was the map, parchment so old it crumbled if you breathed on it. Thorn went half mad with excitement, said it'd lead to a fortune. Miss Marple nodded, her expression one of polite interest, though her mind was cataloguing every word. "And you saw the map yourself?" I saw it," Harrow said, his voice tightening. "Thorn showed it to me once, to plot our course back. Lines and symbols mostly, pointing to another island. I didn't study it close, didn't need to. My job was getting us there and back, not dreaming of gold." She observed the way his hands resumed their restless dance, a sign, she thought, of discomfort. "You must have been very close to Captain Thorn, working together in such conditions," she said. "No disagreements, I suppose." Harrow's eyes narrowed, and for a moment she saw a flash of something. Anger, perhaps, or fear. "We had our rows," he admitted. "Thorn's a tough boss. Always barking orders, never listening. But I did my job and he paid me fair. No cause to steal from him, if that's what you're getting at." Miss Marple's smile was disarming. "Oh, I'm not getting at anything, Mr. Harrow. I'm merely trying to understand. You see, in my village we once had a gardener who took a silver spoon from the vicarage. He swore he was innocent, but his hands shook just as yours do now when he spoke of it." Harrow's fingers froze, and he leaned forward, his voice low. "I'm no thief, miss. I've trudged through hell for Thorn, saved his neck more than once. When we got back to London, I saw that map safe in his satchel. Last I knew, he was keeping it in that strong box of his. If it's gone, you'd best look at Vance or that Mortimer woman. They're the ones with reasons to cross him." Miss Marple tilted her head, her eyes gentle but piercing. "Mr. Vance, the partner, or Dr. Mortimer, the rival. Why them, do you think?" Harrow hesitated, as if weighing his words. "Vance is too smooth, always talking about profits and plans. He was in Thorn's ear about the map, wanting to see it, wanting to move faster. And Mortimer, she's been after Thorn's finds for years. Showed up at our camp once, poking around, asking questions. She's got no love for him." "And Lady Beatrice Worthington," Miss Marple prompted, her tone as mild as if she were asking about the weather. Harrow shrugged. "Rich lady, big ideas. She came to the docks before we sailed, all smiles and money, but I didn't trust her eyes. Too sharp, like she was counting her cut already." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her mind turning over Harrow's words. His defensiveness reminded her of Mr. Hodge, a St. Mary Mead labourer who'd once hidden a pilfered sack of flour behind righteous indignation. Yet Harrow's mention of the red clay intrigued her. "This island," she said, "with its red clay. Did it cling to your belongings when you returned?" Harrow blinked, caught off guard. "Aye, it did. Got in my boots, my pack, everything. Took weeks to scrub it out. Why?" "Oh, just a thought," she said, her smile serene. But her mind was elsewhere, picturing the smudge of clay she'd later see at the hotel, clay that might betray a visitor to that distant island. "And after you returned to London, did you see Captain Thorn often?" "Not much," Harrow said. "He paid me, and I went my way. Saw him once at the hotel, day before the attack. He was in a mood, muttering about Vance pestering him. That's all I know." Miss Marple nodded, her expression unchanged, though she noted the way Harrow's gaze flicked to the door, as if eager to escape. "You've been most helpful, Mr. Harrow," she said. "I shan't keep you longer. I'm sure a man like you has many demands on his time." He rose, pulling his cap back on with a curt nod. "Just want this business done, miss. Thorne's a good man for all his faults. Hope you find his map." As he left, the door swinging shut behind him, Miss Marple leaned back, her knitting briefly forgotten in her lap. Harrow's nerves, she thought, were not those of a man at ease with his story. His mention of Vance and Mortimer suggested deflection, much like the village baker who'd blamed his apprentice for a missing loaf. Yet his knowledge of the map and the island's clay placed him firmly in the picture. She jotted a few notes in her small pad, her handwriting as neat as her thoughts were sharp. The waitress cleared the table, and Miss Marple glanced out the window, where the fog was lifting to reveal the grey sprawl of London. Harrow was a man of the wild, she mused, accustomed to jungles and seas, not the subtleties of betrayal. Yet betrayal, she knew, was universal, whether in a Pacific storm or a village lane. She would need to see the others, Vance, with his smooth ambition, Lady Beatrice with her wealth, and Mortimer with her envy. Each would offer a piece of the puzzle, and Miss Marple, with her quiet patience, would fit them together. She rose, leaving a generous tip for the waitress, and stepped into the street, her black handbag tucked under her arm. Sir Henry would be expecting her report, but first she wished to visit the Anchor Hotel, where the map had vanished. The clay, the strongbox, the broken window, these were threads she would follow, just as she'd once traced a stolen brooch to a maid's attic in St. Mary Mead. The guide's account was only the beginning, and Miss Marple's mind, like her garden, was already blooming with possibilities. Chapter 4. The Partner's Ambition. The late morning light filtered through the tall windows of Edward Vance's office, a sleek modern affair in the heart of London's financial district. Miss Jane Marple, seated in a cushioned chair that seemed designed more for show than comfort, observed the room with her usual quiet attention. The polished mahogany desk, the leather-bound ledgers, the map of the Pacific pinned to the wall, all spoke of a man who valued appearances as much as ambition. A faint scent of cigar smoke lingered, and Miss Marple noted the absence of dust, a testament to meticulous care, not unlike Mrs. Price's parlour in St. Mary Mead, where every surface gleamed to mask a family's secrets. Edward Vance entered with a confident stride, his tailored suit and polished shoes marking him as a man who moved easily in the world of wealth. In his mid-30s, with dark hair slicked back and a smile that flashed too readily, he exuded a charm that Miss Marple found reminiscent of young Mr. Ellison, a St. Mary Mead solicitor who'd once persuaded half the village to invest in a dubious scheme. Vance extended a hand, his grip firm but brief, and took the seat opposite her, leaning forward with an air of eager cooperation. "Miss Marple," he said, his voice smooth as the silk tie at his throat, "Sir Henry speaks highly of you. I'm delighted to assist, though I'm not sure what I can add to poor Reginald's misfortune." Miss Marple's smile was gentle, her eyes sharp behind her spectacles. "You're very kind, Mr. Vance. I only wish to understand the circumstances of Captain Thorne's loss. You were his partner, I believe, in this venture for the treasure?" Vance nodded, his expression one of practised sincerity. "Indeed. Reginald and I go back years. Met during the war, you know, when he was still in the Navy. We've been partners in several Expeditions, pooling resources, sharing the risks. This Pacific venture was our boldest yet. A pirate horde, no less. Reginald found the map, and I handled the business side, securing funds, planning the next steps. It was to be our triumph. Miss Marple tilted her head, her knitting needles clicking softly in her lap, a habit that seemed to put others at ease while her mind worked tirelessly. "And you saw the map yourself?" she asked, her tone as mild as if inquiring about the weather. Vance's smile faltered just for a moment before he recovered. "Only briefly. Reginald was protective of it, kept it locked away, even from me. Showed it to me once, at the hotel, to discuss our plans. Parchment, faded ink, all very romantic. I urged him to have it copied, but he wouldn't hear of it. Said it was safer in his strongbox." She noted the slight edge in his voice, a hint of frustration that reminded her of Mr. Carter, a St. Mary Mead shopkeeper who chafed when his partner refused to modernize their business. "You must have been eager to move forward," she said. "Such a discovery would demand swift action, I imagine." "Oh, absolutely," Vance said, leaning back with a casual air that seemed a touch too studied. "Time's money in this game. I was pressing Reginald to organize the next expedition, ships, crew, supplies. Lady Beatrice was keen to see returns on her investment, and I didn't want to lose momentum. But Reginald was cautious, too cautious if you ask me. Kept saying we needed more time to plan." Miss Marple's needles paused, her gaze steady. "And did you find his caution? Trying, perhaps?" Vance laughed, a sound that rang a little hollow. "Trying? Well, I suppose you could say that. Reginald's a brilliant explorer, but he's not a businessman. I had to remind him that fortunes aren't won by sitting on your hands. Still, we were partners. Equal shares, equal say. I respected his judgment." His words were smooth, but Miss Marple detected a flicker of impatience, like that of Miss Langley, a St. Mary Mead seamstress who'd once schemed to outshine her rival at a village fair. "You mentioned Lady Beatrice," she said. "She funded the expedition, I understand. Did you deal with her directly?" Vance nodded, his fingers adjusting his cufflinks. "Oh, yes. Charming woman, sharp as a tack. She came to me first, you know. Heard about our plans and offered to bankroll us. Wanted a stake in the treasure, of course. I met her several times to discuss terms, keep her in the loop. She was at the hotel the day before the theft, actually, talking to Reginald about expenses." Miss Marple's eyebrows lifted slightly. "At the hotel? How interesting! And did you see her there?" "No," Vance said quickly, then paused as if catching himself. "I mean, I was there earlier, but not when she visited. Reginald mentioned it later. Said she was pressing him about the map, wanting details. She's not one to be kept in the dark." Miss Marple nodded, her mind filing away the detail. Lady Beatrice's visit, so close to the theft, was a thread to follow, much like the time Mrs. Clement's brooch vanished after a church committee meeting. "And Dr. Clara Mortimer?" she asked. "Captain Thorne mentioned her as a rival." Vance's smile tightened, his eyes narrowing. "Clara? She's a vulture, that one. Always circling Reginald's work, trying to steal his thunder. She's a scholar, not an explorer. Lives in books, not the field. But she's got a nose for his leads. Showed up at our office once, asking about the Pacific trip. I wouldn't put it past her to try something underhanded." Miss Marple observed the way his fingers tapped the desk, a restless gesture that spoke of more than casual dislike. "You sound quite certain of her ill intentions," she said softly. "Have you evidence of her interference?" "Not evidence exactly," Vance admitted, his tone grudging. But she's been seen near the hotel, sniffing around. Reginald caught her following him once, before we left for the Pacific. She's obsessed with beating him to the prize. Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm, her thoughts turning to the red clay Captain Thorne had mentioned. "This island you explored," she said, "with its distinctive soil. Did you visit it yourself, Mr. Vance?" He blinked, caught off guard. "Me? No, I'm the desk man, not the adventurer. Reginald and Harrow handled the fieldwork." "I saw the clay, though. Reginald brought back samples, showed them to me. Red as rust, sticks like glue. Why do you ask?" "Just a passing thought," she said, her smile serene but her mind alert. The clay, she knew, might be a clue, like the dirt on young Tommy's boots that had once led her to a stolen pie in St. Mary Mead. Vance's polished shoes, she noted, were spotless, but his quick dismissal of the question suggested a man eager to steer the conversation elsewhere. "Tell me, Mr. Vance," she continued, her voice gentle, "what are your plans now that the map is gone? Surely such a setback affects your partnership." Vance leaned forward, his charm returning like a well-rehearsed act. "Oh, it's a blow, no question. But I'm not one to give up. Reginald's got his notes, his memory. We'll rebuild, find a way forward. I've already been talking to investors, keeping the dream alive. That's my job, keeping the wheels turning." His enthusiasm, Miss Marple thought, was a shade too bright, like the false cheer of Mr. Peterson, who'd once boasted of a failing business to deflect suspicion. "You're very dedicated," she said. "Captain Thorne is fortunate to have such a partner." Vance's smile widened, but his eyes remained cool. "We're a team, Miss Marple. Always have been. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a meeting. Happy to help further if you need me." She rose, her movements unhurried, and thanked him warmly, though her mind was already sifting through his words. As she stepped into the street, the clamour of London greeting her once more, she reflected on Vance's polished demeanour. His ambition was clear, but so was his unease when pressed about the map and the clay. He was, she thought, like a village heir, impatient for his inheritance, smiling while plotting his gain. Miss Marple hailed a taxi, her thoughts turning to the Anchor Hotel, where she hoped to inspect the scene of the crime. Vance's smooth answers and quick deflections had only deepened her curiosity. The map, the attack, the clay, these were pieces of a puzzle, and she would need to see Lady Beatrice and Dr. Mortimer to complete the picture. For now, she tucked her knitting into her handbag, her mind as sharp as the needles within, ready to unravel the next thread in the mystery of the vanished explorer's map. Chapter 5. The Funder's Motive. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across Mayfair as Miss Jane Marple stepped from the taxi onto the cobbled street before Lady Beatrice Worthington's residence. The house, a Georgian masterpiece with ivy-clad walls and gleaming windows, stood as a testament to wealth and taste, its grandeur a stark contrast to the modest cottages of St. Mary Mead. Miss Marple adjusted her gloves, her black handbag tucked neatly under her arm, and rang the bell. The door opened promptly, revealing a butler whose impeccable uniform and stiff posture reminded her of Mr. Reeves, the St. Mary Mead grocer, who wore his respectability like a badge to conceal a penchant for gossip. "Miss Marple, to see Lady Beatrice," she said, her voice gentle but clear. The butler inclined his head and led her through a marble-floored hall, adorned with portraits of stern ancestors, their eyes seeming to follow her as she passed. The air carried the faint scent of lavender polish, and Miss Marple noted the meticulous order of the place, not unlike Mrs. Hartley's parlour, where every ornament was positioned to deflect scrutiny from a wayward son. Lady Beatrice Worthington awaited her in a drawing-room that gleamed with opulence. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and a Persian rug softened the polished floor. Lady Beatrice, a tall woman in her late 50s with silver hair, swept into an elegant chignon, rose from a velvet sofa to greet her guest. Her emerald green dress shimmered, and her smile, though polite, held the cool assurance of one accustomed to command. Miss Marple recognized the type at once, akin to Lady Ashton of St. Mary Mead, whose charitable acts masked a steely determination to control every village event. "Miss Marple," Lady Beatrice said, her voice smooth as the silk curtains behind her. "Sir Henry Clithering mentioned you'd be calling. Please sit. Tea?" "Thank you, Lady Beatrice," Miss Marple replied, settling into a cushioned chair with the ease of one at home in any setting. "Tea would be lovely." A maid appeared, as if summoned by thought alone, and set out a silver tea service with delicate precision. Miss Marple observed the maid's quick, silent movements, reminiscent of young Ellen, who'd once pilfered sugar from the vicarage kitchen to cover a debt. As the tea was poured, Lady Beatrice leaned back, her hands folded in her lap, her eyes assessing her visitor with a curiosity that bordered on amusement. "I understand you're looking into Captain Thorne's unfortunate incident," Lady Beatrice said. "A dreadful business, that theft. I do hope you can help him recover his map." Miss Marple sipped her tea, her blue eyes meeting Lady Beatrice's with quiet intensity. "I hope so too, Lady Beatrice. Perhaps you could tell me about your involvement with Captain Thorne's expedition. You funded it, I believe." Lady Beatrice nodded, her expression composed. "Indeed. I've always had a passion for adventure, though I leave the fieldwork to men like Reginald. I met him through Edward Vance, his partner, who approached me last year with a proposal. A Pacific island, a lost pirate horde. It was too thrilling to resist. I provided the funds for their journey, in exchange for a share of any treasure found. A risky investment, perhaps, but I've never shied from a gamble." Miss Marple's knitting needles, retrieved from her handbag, began their soft rhythm, a sound that seemed to lull the room into a false sense of ease. "A generous investment," she said. "You must have had great faith in Captain Thorne's abilities." "Oh, Reginald is exceptional," Lady Beatrice said, her tone warm but measured. "Fearless, determined, with a knack for finding what others miss. Edward assured me he was the man for the job, and I've not been disappointed. The map they found was proof enough of that." "You saw the map, then?" Miss Marple asked, her voice as gentle as a breeze. Lady Beatrice hesitated, her fingers brushing the pearl brooch at her throat. "Only a glimpse. Reginald showed it to me at the Anchor Hotel, a few days before it was stolen. He was cautious, naturally, kept it in that strong box of his. But the parchment, the faded ink, it was quite extraordinary. I urged him to have it photographed, for safety, but he was adamant about keeping it secret." Miss Marple noted the slight pause before her answer, a telltale sign she'd seen in Mrs. Clement, who'd once hesitated before admitting to a lost recipe that later turned up in a rival's kitchen. "You visited the hotel, then," she said. "The day before the theft, I believe Mr. Vance mentioned." Lady Beatrice's smile tightened, though her composure held. "Yes, I called on Reginald to discuss our next steps. The expedition had cost a great deal, and I wanted assurances about the timeline for the treasure hunt. He was distracted, I'd say. Worried about the map, perhaps. I left after a brief talk, nothing more. Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, her mind turning over the timing of the visit. And did you notice anything unusual at the hotel? Anyone out of place, perhaps? Nothing at all, Lady Beatrice said, her voice firm. It was a quiet evening. The hotel staff were about, and I saw no one else. I was only there for half an hour. Miss Marple nodded, her expression serene, though she filed away the detail for later scrutiny. A quiet evening, she thought, yet a map had vanished, and a man had been attacked mere hours later. "You've known Mr. Vance for some time, I gather," she said, shifting the subject. "He seems a most capable partner." Lady Beatrice's eyes softened, a hint of warmth breaking through her reserve. "Edward is a charmer, no question. He has a way of making grand plans sound attainable. He handled the financial arrangements flawlessly, kept me informed at every step. If anyone could turn Reginald's dreams into reality, it's Edward." Miss Marple observed the faint flush in Lady Beatrice's cheeks, a sign she'd seen in Miss Harmon, a St. Mary Mead spinster who'd once fallen for a travelling salesman's flattery. "And Dr. Clara Mortimer?" she asked. "Captain Thorne mentioned her as a rival. Have you met her?" Lady Beatrice's lips pursed, a flicker of disdain crossing her face. "Once or twice, at scholarly gatherings. She's a formidable woman, but bitter. Always complaining about Reginald's successes as if he'd stolen them from her. I wouldn't trust her near anything valuable. She has the look of someone who'd do anything to win." Miss Marple's needles paused, her gaze steady. "A strong accusation," she said softly. "Have you reason to suspect her in this matter?" "No proof, if that's what you mean," Lady Beatrice said, her tone cool. "But she was in London when the map was stolen. I saw her name on a lecture list at the museum, not far from the hotel. It's no secret she envies Reginald." Miss Marple nodded, her thoughts drifting to the red clay Captain Thorne had described. "This island they visited," she said, "with its distinctive soil. Did you ever see any samples of it?" Captain Thorne mentioned a red clay. Lady Beatrice frowned, as if the question puzzled her. "Clay? No, I don't believe so. Reginald spoke of the island's harsh terrain, but I never saw any samples. My interest was in the treasure, not the geology." "Why do you ask?" "Oh, just a detail," Miss Marple said, her smile disarming. But her mind was alert, picturing the smudge of clay she'd later find at the hotel. A clue that might point to someone who'd walked that distant island. Lady Beatrice's polished nails and immaculate dress suggested no trace of such soil, but her visit to the hotel, so close to the theft, was a thread worth pulling. "You've been most helpful, Lady Beatrice," Miss Marple said, setting her knitting aside. "I shan't take more of your time. You must be busy with your many interests." Lady Beatrice rose, her smile gracious but guarded. "Not at all, Miss Marple. I want that map found as much as Reginald does. Do let me know if I can assist further." As the butler escorted her to the door, Miss Marple glanced back at the drawing-room. Its opulence a stark contrast to the gritty reality of the Anchor Hotel. Lady Beatrice's poise, she thought, was like that of Mrs. Langley, who'd once concealed a family scandal behind a flawless tea party. Wealth could mask many things, but not the truth, not forever. Miss Marple stepped into the Mayfair street, the air cool against her face, and hailed a taxi to Sir Henry's office, The funder's motive, she mused, might lie not in greed but in control, or perhaps a desire to protect her investment. The next step was Dr. Clara Mortimer, the rival, whose envy might hold the key to the puzzle. With her knitting tucked away and her mind as sharp as ever, Miss Marple prepared to unravel the next thread in the mystery of the vanished explorer's map. Chapter 6. The Rival's Envy. The museum archive, tucked away in a quiet corner of Bloomsbury, was a labyrinth of dust and shadows, its air heavy with the musty scent of old books and preserved artifacts. Miss Jane Marple, her black handbag clasped firmly in her gloved hands, stepped carefully over the worn stone floor, her sensible shoes echoing softly in the cavernous space. The archive reminded her of the attic in St. Mary Mead's vicarage, where forgotten hymnals and parish records hid secrets as surely as any treasure map. Sir Henry Clithering had arranged this meeting with Dr. Clara Mortimer, Captain Thorne's rival, and Miss Marple felt a prickle of anticipation. Envy, she knew from village intrigues, was a potent force, capable of twisting reason into malice, much like Miss Harrow's spite when she'd sabotaged a rival's roses at the St. Mary Mead flower show. Dr. Clara Mortimer awaited her at a long oak table strewn with maps and manuscripts, her figure framed by shelves that groaned under the weight of leather-bound tomes. She was a woman of middle age, with sharp features and dark hair pulled into a severe bun, her eyes behind wire-rimmed spectacles glinting with a mix of intellect and impatience. Her tweed suit, practical yet worn at the cuffs, suggested a life dedicated to study rather than luxury. As Miss Marple approached, Dr. Mortimer looked up, her expression one of barely concealed irritation, as if the interruption were an affront to her work. "Miss Marple, I presume," Dr. Mortimer said, her voice crisp, with the clipped precision of a schoolmistress correcting a wayward pupil. "Sir Henry Clithering said you wished to discuss Reginald Thorne's unfortunate affair. I'm not sure what I can contribute, but I'll do my best." Miss Marple smiled, her demeanour as gentle as a summer breeze, and settled into a chair across from Dr. Mortimer. "You're very kind to spare the time, Dr. Mortimer. I understand you're a scholar of some renown, with a particular interest in Captain Thorne's field. Perhaps you could tell me about your connection to him." Dr. Mortimer's lips tightened, and she set down the magnifying glass she'd been using to examine a faded chart. "Connection is a generous term," she said, her tone sharp. "Reginald Thorne and I have crossed paths for years, always on opposing sides. He's an adventurer, not a scholar, chasing glory while I seek knowledge. His methods are reckless, his claims exaggerated. That Pacific expedition of his, he stumbled onto that island because of my research, though he'd never admit it." Miss Marple's knitting needles emerged from her handbag, their soft clicking a counterpoint to Dr. Mortimer's intensity. "Your research?" she prompted, her voice mild. "You knew of the island, then?" Dr. Mortimer leaned forward, her eyes flashing. "I spent years piecing together accounts of that pirate ship. Logs, letters, old charts. I pinpointed the island's location, but lacked the funds to mount an expedition. Thorne, with his charm and his rich backers, swooped in and took the credit. That map he found, it should have been mine." Miss Marple noted the bitterness in her voice, a tone she'd heard in Miss Granger, a St. Mary Mead spinster who'd once envied a neighbour's prize-winning marrows. "You must have been very disappointed," she said, her eyes gentle but observant. "Did you ever see the map?" Dr. Mortimer hesitated, her fingers brushing the edge of a manuscript. "No," she said too quickly. "I heard about it, of course. Thorn couldn't resist boasting at a lecture I attended, but he kept it hidden, like some precious relic. I only knew it existed because Edward Vance let slip a few details when I pressed him." Miss Marple's needles paused, her gaze steady. "You spoke to Mr. Vance about the map?" Dr. Mortimer's cheeks flushed, a faint crack in her composure. "Briefly. I ran into him at a symposium months ago. He was eager to talk, always looking for investors. I asked about Thorn's find, hoping to learn something useful. He mentioned the map, said it was parchment, marked with symbols. That's all I got out of him." Miss Marple nodded, her mind filing away the detail. Vance's loose tongue, she thought, was a thread worth tugging, much like the time young Tommy's boasts had revealed a pilfered pie in St. Mary Mead. "And were you in London when the map was stolen?" she asked, her tone as innocent as if inquiring about a recipe. Dr. Mortimer's eyes narrowed, but she answered readily. "I was. I gave a lecture at the museum that week, on Pacific maritime history, ironically. But I was nowhere near Thorn's hotel, if that's what you're implying. I have better things to do than skulk around docks." Miss Marple smiled, unruffled. "Of course, Dr. Mortimer. I'm merely trying to piece things together. You see, in my village, we once had a schoolteacher who was quite put out when her rival won a poetry prize. She followed her about for weeks, hoping to catch her out. Envy, I find, can lead to curious behavior." Dr. Mortimer's jaw tightened, and she leaned back, her hands clasped tightly on the table. "I'm not some petty village gossip, Miss Marple. If I wanted a best Thorn, I'd do it through scholarship, not theft. Besides, I was at the museum until late the night of the attack, preparing my notes. Ask the curator if you don't believe me." Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm, her expression serene. "I'm sure you were, Dr. Mortimer, but you'll forgive an old lady's curiosity. Did you ever visit the island Captain Thorn explored? The one with the red clay?" Dr. Mortimer blinked, caught off guard. "No, I've never been there. My work is in archives, not jungles. Thorn mentioned the clay once, at a conference, said it was a nuisance, clogging his gear, but I've no first-hand knowledge of it." Miss Marple observed the way Dr. Mortimer's fingers tightened on her pen, a gesture that reminded her of Miss Langley, who'd gripped her teacup too hard when denying a village scandal. The clay, she thought, was becoming a recurring motif, like the mud on a St. Mary Mead thief's boots. "And Lady Beatrice Worthington?" she asked, shifting the subject. "You've met her, I believe." Dr. Mortimer's lips curled in a faint sneer. "The great patroness? Yes, at a few events. She's all charm and money, but there's steel beneath it. She funded Thorn's trip, but I'd wager she's not as altruistic as she seems. People like her don't part with fortunes without expecting control." Miss Marple nodded, her mind noting the disdain that echoed Harrow's distrust of Lady Beatrice. "You've been most helpful, Dr. Mortimer," she said, tucking her knitting away. "I shan't keep you from your work." Dr. Mortimer rose, her posture stiff. "I hope you find Thorn's map, Miss Marple, but if you ask me, he's brought this on himself. He's made enemies, and not just me." As Miss Marple made her way out of the archive, the dim light casting long shadows across the stone floor, she reflected on Dr. Mortimer's words. The scholar's envy was palpable, a force as sharp as any village grudge, yet her alibi at the museum warranted checking. The mention of Vance's indiscretion and the clay's nuisance stuck in her mind, threads to weave into the larger pattern. She stepped into the Bloomsbury street, where a chill wind stirred the air, and hailed a taxi to Sir Henry's office. The rival's envy, she mused, was a motive as old as time, but whether it led to theft or violence remained to be seen. With her knitting safely stowed, and her thoughts as clear as a St. Mary Mead morning, Miss Marple prepared to visit the Anchor Hotel, where the scene of the crime might reveal the next clue in the mystery of the vanished explorer's map. Chapter 7. The Scene of the Crime. The Anchor Hotel, perched on a gritty street near London's docks, was a far cry from the elegance of Mayfair or the scholarly hush of Bloomsbury. Its weathered brick facade, streaked with soot, and the creaking sign above the entrance spoke of a place that catered to sailors, travellers, and those who preferred to keep their business in the shadows. Miss Jane Marple, stepping from the taxi into the damp air of late afternoon, felt the weight of the city's pulse, its clamour of carts, the distant hoot of ships, and the sharp tang of salt and tar. Her black coat and neat hat blended with the muted tones of the street, but her sharp blue eyes missed nothing, taking in the hotel's sagging shutters and the loiterers who eyed her curiously before drifting away. It reminded her of the Saint. Mary Mead Inn, where secrets were whispered over pints, and a stolen bicycle had once been traced to a stable boy's carelessness. Sir Henry Clithering had arranged for the hotel manager, Mr. Gibbs, to show her Captain Thorne's room, and as she entered the lobby, she noted its faded charm. A threadbare carpet, a brass spittoon in the corner, and a reception desk cluttered with ledgers. Mr. Gibbs, a nervous man with thinning hair and a tie askew, greeted her with a fidgety bow, his manner not unlike Mr. Trotter, the St. Mary Mead postmaster who trembled when questioned about missing letters. "Miss Marple, is it?" he said, his voice high and strained. "Sir Henry said you'd want to see room 12. Dreadful business, that attack on Captain Thorne. We're a respectable place, you know, despite appearances." Miss Marple smiled, her expression disarming. "I'm sure you are, Mr. Gibbs. I'd be grateful if you could show me the room and tell me what you recall of that night." Mr. Gibbs led her up a narrow staircase, its wood creaking underfoot, and down a dim corridor, lit by flickering gas lamps. The air was heavy with the scent of damp plaster and stale tobacco, and Miss Marple's thoughts drifted to the time she'd traced a pilfered brooch to a maid's attic in St. Mary Mead. Evidence, she knew, often hid in plain sight, overlooked by those too busy to notice. Room 12 was small, its furnishings spare. A single bed with a sagging mattress, a washstand with a cracked basin, and a wardrobe that leaned slightly to one side. The window, its frame splintered from the intruder's escape, overlooked a narrow alley where shadows moved like ghosts in the fading light. Miss Marple stepped inside, her eyes scanning the room with the precision of a gardener inspecting her roses. The bed was unmade, its sheets tangled, and papers, maps and notes lay scattered on a small table, evidence of the struggle Captain Thorne had described. "Has the room been touched since the attack?" she asked, her voice gentle but firm. Mr. Gibbs shook his head, his hands twisting together. "Not much, miss." The police looked about, but I told the maids to leave it be. Captain Thorne's things are still here. He's staying with a friend till he's mended. Miss Marple nodded, her attention drawn to the floor. The carpet, a faded green, was scuffed and stained, but near the window she spotted a faint smudge of red clay, its hue distinct against the drab surroundings. She knelt, her movements careful, and examined it closely, recalling Thorne's mention of the Pacific Island soil. It was, she thought, like the mud on young Billy's shoes when he'd trespassed in her garden. A clue that spoke louder than words. She took a small envelope from her handbag and scraped a sample of the clay, tucking it away for later analysis. "Mr. Gibbs," she said, rising, "did you notice anything unusual the night of the attack? Visitors, perhaps, or noises?" Gibbs wiped his brow, his unease palpable. "It was a quiet night, miss, or so I thought. I was at the desk till 11, then checking the boiler. Heard nothing till Captain Thorne shouted, just after midnight. I ran up and found him on the floor, blood on his arm, the room a mess. The window was broken, like someone climbed out. I called the police straight away." Miss Marple's eyes flicked to the window, its jagged edges catching the light. "And visitors?" "Captain Thorne mentioned Lady Beatrice Worthington was here the day before." Gibbs nodded, his fingers fidgeting with his tie. "Aye, she came in the evening, all proper and grand. Stayed maybe 20 minutes. I saw her leave, took a taxi. No one else I recall, though the docks are busy, and folks come and go." Miss Marple's knitting needles, retrieved from her handbag, began their soft rhythm, a sound that seemed to steady the nervous manager. "And Mr. Vance, or Dr. Mortimer, or perhaps Mr. Harrow? Did you see them around that time?" Gibbs frowned, his brow furrowing. "Mr. Vance was here a day or two before, talking with the captain. Didn't see Harrow after he left a week back. Dr. Mortimer, though, she was near the hotel once, I think. Saw her across the street looking up at the windows, but that was days before the theft." Miss Marple's needles paused, her mind noting the detail. Dr. Mortimer's presence near the hotel, like Miss Granger's lurking near a rival's garden, suggested more than casual interest. "And the strong-box?" she asked. "Captain Thorne said it was picked, not forced." "Aye," Gibbs said, pointing to a small iron box under the bed, its lid ajar. "Police said it was a clean job, no damage to the lock. Whoever did it knew their way around such things." Miss Marple knelt again, inspecting the strong-box. Its lock was intact, its surface unmarred, a sign of skill that reminded her of Mr. Hodge, a St. Mary Mead labourer who'd once picked a lock to steal a neighbour's tools. She rose, her eyes lingering on the scattered papers. Charts of the Pacific, sketches of islands, none resembling the lost map. "Did you clean the room before the police arrived?" she asked. Gibbs shook his head vigorously. "No, miss, I left it as it was. Didn't want to meddle. The police took a look, but they didn't find much. Just the broken window and the captain's injuries." Miss Marple nodded, her thoughts turning to the clay. It was a link to the island, a clue that might narrow the suspects. Harrow had been there, as had Thorne, but Vance, Lady Beatrice, and Dr. Mortimer claimed no first-hand knowledge of the soil. Yet someone had left that smudge, and Miss Marple's mind, as sharp as her garden shears, was already pruning possibilities. "Thank you, Mr. Gibbs," she said, her smile warm. "You've been most helpful. Might I have a moment alone to look about?" Gibbs hesitated, then nodded. "I'll be downstairs, miss. Just ring if you need me." As he left, Miss Marple stood by the window, her gaze tracing the alley below. The broken frame suggested haste, but the picked lock spoke of precision, a curious contrast. She thought of a saint. Mary Mead burglary, where a thief had left a footprint in the flower bed, betraying his identity. The clay, she mused, might serve the same purpose. She examined the room once more, noting the absence of fingerprints, wiped clean perhaps, and the paper's disarray, as if someone had searched for more than just the map. Stepping into the corridor, she closed the door and made her way downstairs, her mind weaving the threads of the case. The clay, the lock, the visitors, each was a piece of the puzzle, and Miss Marple knew that patience would fit them together. She thanked Mr. Gibbs, who hovered anxiously by the desk, and stepped into the street, where the fog was gathering like a village secret. A taxi took her to Sir Henry's office, where she intended to share her findings. The scene of the crime had spoken, and though its voice was faint, Miss Marple's keen ear had caught its whispers. The next step was to confirm the clay's origin, and to probe deeper into the lives of Harrow, Vance, Lady Beatrice, and Dr. Mortimer. With her knitting tucked away and her thoughts as clear as a St. Mary Mead dawn, she prepared to unravel the next thread in the mystery of the vanished explorer's map. Chapter 8. A Village Parallel. The evening light filtered through the high windows of Sir Henry Clithering's Bloomsbury office, casting a warm glow over the oak-panelled walls and the cluttered desk where Miss Jane Marple sat, her knitting needles resting momentarily in her lap. The room, with its faint scent of pipe tobacco and old books, felt almost homely to her, reminiscent of the saint. Mary Mead Vicarage, where many a village mystery had been unravelled over tea. Sir Henry, his face lined with the weight of his years at Scotland Yard, leaned forward in his chair, his eyes keen with anticipation as he awaited her report. Miss Marple, her black handbag at her side and her expression as serene as a summer afternoon, began to recount her findings. Her voice soft but precise, weaving the threads of the case with the care of a gardener tending her roses. "I've spoken to them all now, Henry," she said, her blue eyes meeting his. "Mr. Harrow, Mr. Vance, Lady Beatrice and Dr. Mortimer. Each has their own story, and each, I think, has something they'd rather not share. It's not unlike Saint Mary Mead, you know, where everyone has a secret, though most are harmless enough." Sir Henry chuckled, settling back with a cup of tea. "You always draw these village parallels, Jane. But go on. What have you made of our suspects?" Miss Marple's fingers resumed their knitting, the soft click of the needles a steady rhythm as she spoke. "Let us begin with Mr. Harrow the guide. He's a man of the wilds, rough and unpolished, much like old Mr. Hodge, who used to poach pheasants in St. Mary Mead. Harrow's nervous Henry. His hands tremble when he speaks of the map, and he's quick to point fingers at Vance and Dr. Mortimer. He admits to seeing the map on the island, and he knows its value. His discomfort reminds me of Mr. Hodge, when he was caught with a brace of birds he couldn't explain. I don't say he's guilty, but he's hiding something, perhaps a small indiscretion that makes him fear scrutiny." Sir Henry nodded, jotting a note. "Harrow's a tough nut, but he's no mastermind. What about Vance?" Miss Marple's lips pursed slightly, her needles pausing. "Mr. Vance is ambitious, Henry, and ambition can be a dangerous thing. He's smooth, charming, like young Mr. Ellison, who persuaded half the village to invest in a scheme that went nowhere. Vance wants the treasure, and he chafes at Captain Thorne's caution. He saw the map briefly, he says, but his impatience is clear. He wants to move faster, to turn dreams into gold. His polished shoes and quick answers suggest a man who plans carefully, but there's a flicker of unease when I mention the island's red clay. It's as if he knows more than he lets on. "And Lady Beatrice?" Sir Henry asked, his brow furrowing. "A formidable woman," Miss Marple said, her tone thoughtful. "She's like Lady Ashton in our village, all poise and control, but with a will of iron beneath. She funded the expedition, and she's not one to part with money lightly. Her visit to the hotel the day before the theft is curious. She claims it was about finances, but her composure is too perfect, like Mrs. Hartley, who hid a family scandal behind a flawless tea party. I wonder if her motive is not just profit, but a need to ensure her investment isn't squandered." Sir Henry's eyes narrowed. "And Dr. Mortimer, the rival?" Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, her gaze distant. "Dr. Mortimer is driven by envy, Henry, and envy is a fire that burns deep. She's like Miss Granger, who once ruined a neighbour's marrows out of spite. Dr. Mortimer believes Captain Thorne stole her research, and her bitterness is palpable. She denies seeing the map, but she was near the hotel days before the theft, and her quick denial of visiting the island makes me wonder. She's clever, precise, like the schoolmistress who rewrote a rival's poem to claim a prize. Envy could push her to desperate acts." Sir Henry leaned back, his fingers steepled. "A fine cast of characters, Jane. But what of the scene at the hotel? Did you find anything there?" Miss Marple's eyes brightened, and she reached into her handbag, producing the small envelope containing the red clay. "This, Henry, is what caught my attention. A smudge of red clay on the carpet in Captain Thorne's room, near the broken window. It's not London's grey dust. It matches his description of the Pacific Island soil. Someone who was there, or had access to its earth, was in that room. Harrow's boots were caked with such clay, but Vance, Lady Beatrice, and Dr. Mortimer claim no first-hand knowledge of the island. Yet the clay was there, Henry, like the mud on young Billy's shoes when he stole apples from my orchard." Sir Henry's eyebrows rose. "That's a find, Jane. Could it have been Thorne himself, leaving the clay?" "Possibly," Miss Marple said, "but he was attacked in bed, and the smudge was near the window, where the thief escaped. It suggests someone else brought it in. I'd like to have this analysed, Henry, to confirm its origin. It may narrow our suspects." Sir Henry took the envelope, his expression one of admiration. "I'll send it to a geologist friend at the museum. Should have results in a day or two. Anything else from the hotel?" "The strong box," Miss Marple said, her voice soft but firm. "Picked clean, no damage. It takes skill, Henry, like Mr. Hodge picking a lock to steal tools in St. Mary Mead. Harrow might have such a skill from his rough life, but Vance's precision and Dr. Mortimer's cleverness could also manage it. Lady Beatrice perhaps has the resources to hire such a hand. The broken window, though, suggests haste, a clumsy exit after a careful theft." Sir Henry scribbled another note, his pen scratching the paper. "You've got a sharp eye, Jane. Any theories yet?" Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm, her mind as clear as a St. Mary Mead morning. "Theories are like seeds, Henry. They need time to grow. But I see patterns. Harrow's nerves suggest guilt, perhaps not of theft, but of something smaller. Vance's ambition could drive him to betray his partner. Lady Beatrice's control might hide a need to secure her stake. And Dr. Mortimer's envy could push her to sabotage a rival. The clay is the key, I think. It ties someone to that island, or to Thorn's belongings. Sir Henry leaned forward, his voice low. What's your next move? I'd like to know more about their pasts, Miss Marple said. In St. Mary Mead, a person's history often betrays their motives. Mr. Hodges' poaching went back years, you see, and Miss Granger's envy stemmed from a childhood slight. Could you look into their backgrounds? Harrow's travels, Vance's business dealings, Lady Beatrice's investments, Dr. Mortimer's research, and perhaps check Dr. Mortimer's alibi at the museum. She claims she was there late the night of the theft. Sir Henry nodded, making a final note. I'll have my contacts dig into it. Anything else? Miss Marple's eyes twinkled, her smile gentle. Just a thought, Henry. People are like my roses, beautiful on the surface, but their roots hide in the dark. We must dig a little deeper to find the truth. As she rose, tucking her knitting into her handbag, Sir Henry escorted her to the door, the city's hum filtering through the windows. The parallels to St. Mary Mead, she thought, were striking. Nerves, ambition, control, envy. All familiar motives dressed in grander costumes. The clay, the lock, the scattered papers, these were clues, like the footprints in her garden that had once led to a thief. With the analysis pending and the suspect's pasts to explore, Miss Marple stepped into the evening, her mind as sharp as her knitting needles, ready to weave the next thread in the mystery of the vanished explorer's map. Chapter 9. The Clay's Secret. The morning air in Sir Henry Clithering's Bloomsbury office carried a crisp edge, tempered by the warmth of a coal fire crackling in the hearth. Miss Jane Marple sat in her usual chair, her black handbag at her side, and her knitting needles moving with their familiar, soothing rhythm. The room, with its shelves of legal tomes and the faint aroma of polished wood, felt like a sanctuary from London's clamour, not unlike the quiet of her St. Mary Mead parlour, where many a village puzzle had been solved. Sir Henry, his face alight with anticipation, held a thin report from his geologist friend, the results of the clay analysis Miss Marple had requested. Her blue eyes, sharp behind her spectacles, watched him as he opened the folder, her mind already turning over the threads of the case like a gardener inspecting her soil. Jane, you were right about the clay, Sir Henry said, his voice tinged with admiration. The sample you took from the Anchor Hotel matches the volcanic soil from that Pacific island Thornton described. Red, high in iron oxide, unique to that region. Whoever left that smudge had either been to the island or handled something from it. Boots, clothes, a satchel, perhaps. Miss Marple's needles paused, her lips curving into a faint smile. How very interesting, Henry. In St. Mary Mead, we once traced a thief by the mud on his boots, young Billy, who'd been in my orchard. This clay is much the same, a silent witness. It tells us someone with a connection to that island was in Captain Thorn's room. Sir Henry leaned back, his fingers drumming on the desk. That points to Harrow, surely. He was there with Thorn. Vance, Lady Beatrice and Dr. Mortimer all claim they never set foot on the island. Miss Marple's eyes twinkled, her expression serene, but her mind as keen as ever. So they say, Henry, but people, like my roses, often hide their roots. Mr. Harrow's boots were indeed caked with such clay, but he's not the only one who might have touched the island's soil. Captain Thorn brought back samples, did he not? Mr. Vance mentioned seeing them, and Lady Beatrice or Dr. Mortimer could have accessed them, perhaps through Thorn's belongings. We mustn't assume too quickly." Sir Henry nodded, his brow furrowing. "Fair point. What else did you notice about the clay's placement?" "It was near the window," Miss Marple said, her voice soft but precise, "where the thief made their escape. Not by the bed, where Captain Thorne was attacked. It suggests the intruder brought it in, perhaps on their shoes or clothes. In St. Mary Mead, a smudge of dirt once led me to a stolen pie, left by young Tommy, who didn't think to clean his boots. This clay is our clue, but we need more to tie it to one of our suspects." Sir Henry flipped through the report, his eyes scanning the pages. "I've also got some background on the four, as you asked. Harrow's a wanderer, worked as a guide across Africa and the Pacific, no fixed address, a few minor scrapes with the law, mostly smuggling small artifacts, nothing serious, but he knows his way around locks, as you suspected." Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, her thoughts drifting to Mr. Hodge, the St. Mary Mead poacher whose petty thefts had masked a deeper guilt. "Smuggling, you say? That might explain his nerves. He may fear exposure, even if he's innocent of this theft." "Vance," Sir Henry continued, "is a different sort. Ambitious, as you noted. He's built a small empire, brokering deals for explorers, but there are whispers of sharp practices, overpromising to investors, skimming profits. No proof, mind you, but he's got debts, and that map would be a ticket to solvency." Miss Marple's lips pursed, her mind recalling Mr. Ellison, the village solicitor whose grand schemes had left many out of pocket. "Ambition and debt are a dangerous pair, Henry. Mr. Vance's charm is a mask, I think, like Mr. Ellison's when he persuaded the village to back his folly. Lady Beatrice," Sir Henry said, turning a page, "is as wealthy as you'd expect, but her investments are bold. Art, expeditions, even a racing stable. She's lost money on ventures before, and there's talk she's stretched thin. The treasure would secure her position." Miss Marple nodded, her thoughts on Lady Ashton, whose charitable facade hid a need to dominate St. Mary Mead's social scene. "Wealth can be a burden, Henry, when it's tied to pride. Lady Beatrice may see the map as her due, not just a profit." "And Dr. Mortimer," Sir Henry said, his tone growing serious. "Her alibi at the museum checks out, partly. The curator confirms she was there late the night of the theft, preparing her lecture, but she left around 11, not midnight as she claimed. The hotel's not far, a quick walk if she was determined." Miss Marple's needles stilled, her eyes narrowing slightly. 11, you say? That leaves time, Henry, just as Miss Granger once found time to tamper with a rival's marrows before a village show. Dr. Mortimer's envy is a fire that burns hot. She may have acted on it. Sir Henry leaned forward, his voice low. "So where does this leave us, Jane?" The clay points to the island, but any of them could have handled Thorne's samples. The lock-picking narrows it to someone skilled. Harrow, perhaps, or Vance, if he's as cunning as he seems. Lady Beatrice could hire such a skill, and Dr. Mortimer's precision might extend to locks. Miss Marple set her knitting aside, her hands folding neatly in her lap. "It's a puzzle, Henry, like the time Mrs. Clement's silver teapot went missing. We thought it was the maid, but it was the curate, hiding his debts. The clay is our strongest clue. It ties someone to the island, directly or indirectly. I'd like to know more about those samples Thorne brought back. Who saw them? Who touched them? And I'd like to speak to Mr. Vance again. His impatience with Thorne's caution is telling. and that map on his office wall of the Pacific struck me as too prominent for a man who claims to stay behind a desk. Sir Henry made a note, his pen scratching the paper. I'll look into the samples. Thorne's staying with a friend. He might know where they are. And I'll arrange another meeting with Vance. Anything else? Miss Marple's eyes twinkled, her smile gentle but resolute. Just a thought, Henry. In St. Mary Mead, the truth often lies in what people don't say. Mr. Vance was quick to dismiss the clay. Lady Beatrice claimed no knowledge of it, and Dr. Mortimer's alibi is not as tight as she'd like. Mr. Harrow's nerves may be a distraction, but we mustn't overlook him. I'll visit the museum myself to see if Dr. Mortimer left any traces there. People, like my garden weeds, often leave signs of their passing. Sir Henry chuckled, rising to escort her to the door. You're a marvel, Jane. I'll have the sample details by tomorrow, and I'll set up Vance for the day after. Where will you stay tonight? My usual lodgings, Miss Marple said, adjusting her hat. The quiet suits me, and I have some thinking to do. This case, Henry, is like my roses, beautifully tangled, but with patience we'll find the root. As she stepped into the Bloomsbury street, the evening fog curling around the lampposts, Miss Marple's mind was alive with possibilities. The clay's secret had confirmed a link to the island, but the question remained, who had carried it into that hotel facetiously? She thought of the village baker, whose flour-dusted apron had betrayed his theft of a neighbour's loaf. The clay, the lock, the alibis, each was a piece of the puzzle, and Miss Marple, with her quiet patience, was determined to fit them together. With her knitting tucked away and her thoughts as sharp as her needles, she hailed a taxi, ready to pursue the next thread in the mystery of the vanished explorer's map. Chapter 10. The Partners' Slip, the Rose and Crown Café, where Miss Jane Marple had met Tom Harrow days earlier, was quieter this afternoon. Its usual bustle softened by a midweek lull. The faint clink of teacups and the murmur of a few patrons provided a backdrop as familiar to Miss Marple as the chatter in St. Mary Mead's tea shop. She sat at the same corner table, her black handbag resting beside her. Her knitting needles moving with their steady rhythm, the cafe's homely atmosphere suited her purpose. Neutral ground, disarming to those unaccustomed to scrutiny, much like the village hall, where secrets were often spilled over a cup of tea. Today, she awaited Edward Vance, Captain Thorne's ambitious partner, whose polished charm and restless impatience had lingered in her mind like the aftertaste of oversteeped tea. Sir Henry Clithering had arranged the meeting, sensing, as Miss Marple did, that Vance's smooth demeanour warranted a closer look. Her visit to the museum the previous day had confirmed Dr. Clara Mortimer's partial alibi. She had indeed left at 11, as the night porter recalled, giving her time to reach the Anchor Hotel by midnight. But the red clay, that stubborn clue, pointed to someone with a connection to the Pacific island, and Vance's quick dismissal of it in their last conversation had struck Miss Marple as too deliberate, like Mr. Ellison's airy denials when accused of swindling St. Mary Mead's investors. She had asked Sir Henry to inquire about the clay samples Captain Thorne had brought back, and his report, delivered that morning, confirmed that Thorne had shown them to Vance in his office, a detail that sharpened her focus on the partner. Vance arrived promptly, his tailored suit and gleaming shoes a stark contrast to the cafe's worn tables. His smile, as bright as ever, carried a hint of wariness. and Miss Marple noted the way his eyes flicked to the door, as if measuring his escape. He settled into the chair opposite her, his posture relaxed, but his fingers adjusting his cufflinks. A nervous tick, she thought, not unlike young Tommy's fidgeting when caught with stolen apples. "Miss Marple," Vance said, his voice smooth as polished oak, "a pleasure to see you again. Sir Henry said you had more questions. I'm happy to help, though I'm not sure what more I can offer." Miss Marple's smile was gentle, her blue eyes warm but piercing behind her spectacles. "You're very kind, Mr. Vance. I've been thinking about our last talk, and I hoped you might clarify a few points. You see, in my village, we once had a shopkeeper who seemed so helpful, yet forgot to mention a key detail that solved a theft. I'm sure you'll be more forthcoming." Vance's smile tightened, but he nodded. "Of course. Ask away." The waitress brought a fresh pot of tea, and Miss Marple poured, her movements unhurried, as if they had all of the time in the world. "You mentioned seeing the map briefly," she began, "when Captain Thorne showed it to you at the hotel. But you also saw samples of the island's red clay, I believe. Captain Thorne brought them to your office, did he not?" Vance's fingers paused on his cufflinks, and for a moment his eyes darted to the teacup before returning to her. "Yes, that's right," he said, his tone casual but a shade too quick. "Reginald brought a few bits. Rocks, soil, that sort of thing. Showed them to me to prove the island's uniqueness. Sticky red stuff. Got everywhere. I brushed it off and forgot about it." Miss Marple's needles clicked softly, her gaze steady. "Forgot about it, you say? Yet you must have handled it closely, Mr. Vance, to know it was sticky. In St. Mary Mead, a boy once claimed he'd barely touched a stolen pie, but the crumbs on his shirt told another story. That clay, it's quite distinctive, isn't it?" Vance leaned back, his smile now a thin line. "I suppose it is, but I'm no geologist, Miss Marple. I looked at the samples, then put them away. Haven't thought of them since. Why the interest in clay?" She sipped her tea, her expression serene. "Oh, just a detail, Mr. Vance. You see, a smudge of that same clay was found in Captain Thorne's hotel room, near the window where the thief escaped. It's curious, don't you think, that such soil should appear in London, far from that Pacific island?" Vance's face remained composed, but Miss Marple noted the slight tightening of his jaw, a sign she'd seen in Mr. Carter, the St. Mary Mead shopkeeper who'd lied about a missing ledger. "Curious, yes," Vance said, "but Reginald was in and out of that room. Could have been his boots, surely." "Perhaps," Miss Marple said, her voice gentle, "but the clay was by the window, not the bed where he was attacked. It suggests someone else brought it in. You were at the hotel a day or two before the theft, were you not?" Vance's fingers resumed their restless dance with his cufflinks. "I was, to discuss plans with Reginald, but I didn't go near his room that night. I was at my club, with witnesses if you need to check." Miss Marple nodded, her needles moving steadily. "I'm sure you were, Mr. Vance. But let us talk of plans. You were eager to move forward with the treasure hunt, I recall. You must have been disappointed when Captain Thorne insisted on caution." Vance's smile returned, but it lacked its earlier warmth. "Disappointed? I suppose so. Reginald's a careful man too. Careful sometimes. I wanted to strike while the iron was hot. Get ships, crew, everything in place. The treasure's no good sitting on an island, is it? But he wanted to wait, study the map, make sure every detail was right." Miss Marple tilted her head, her eyes soft but searching. "And now that the map is gone, what are your plans? Surely a man of your ambition has thought of next steps." Vance leaned forward, his voice taking on a practiced enthusiasm. "Oh, I'm not giving up. Reginald's got his notes, his memory. We'll piece it together, find new backers if need be. I've already got a venture in mind, a new expedition bigger than before. The map's a loss, but it's not the end." His words, Miss Marple thought, were too bright, too rehearsed, like Mr. Peterson's boasts in St. Mary Mead when he'd tried to cover a failing business. "A new venture," she said, her tone encouraging. "How enterprising. Have you spoken to Lady Beatrice about it?" Vance's eyes flickered, and he reached for his tea, his hand steady but his movement deliberate. "Not yet," he said. "She's keen, of course, but I'm still working out the details. No sense troubling her until we're ready." Miss Marple's needles paused, her mind catching the slip. "Troubling her," she said softly. "But I thought you said she visited the hotel to discuss finances, the day before the theft. Surely you spoke then?" Vance's smile faltered, and for a moment his composure cracked, like the time Miss Langley's teacup trembled when denying a village scandal. "Did I say that?" he said, recovering quickly. "I meant Reginald mentioned her visit. I wasn't there myself. Got my days mixed up, I suppose." Miss Marple nodded, her expression unchanged, but her mind was alert. The slip, small as it was, echoed the village grocer's stumble when caught hiding stolen goods. "Easily done, Mr. Vance," she said. "My memory plays tricks too sometimes. But tell me, what do you make of Dr. Mortimer? You seemed certain she might be involved." Vance seized the change of topic, his voice regaining its smoothness. "Clara. She's trouble, always has been. Jealous of Reginald's success, always poking into his work. I wouldn't put it past her to steal the map, just to spite him." Miss Marple's needles resumed their rhythm, her thoughts on the clay and Vance's too quick deflection. "And Mr. Harrow?" she asked. "He seemed to think you were eager to see the map." Vance's laugh was sharp, almost forced. "Harrow? He's a rough sort, loyal to Reginald, but not to me. Probably thinks I'm too soft for the field. He's wrong, though. I know the value of that map as well as anyone." Miss Marple smiled, setting her knitting aside. "You've been most helpful, Mr. Vance. I shan't keep you longer. I'm sure a man like you has many demands on his time." Vance rose, his charm returning like a well-worn coat. "Any time, Miss Marple. Let me know if I can do more." As he left, the cafe door swinging shut behind him, Miss Marple leaned back, her mind sifting through his words. The slip about Lady Beatrice, the unease at the mention of the clay, the eager talk of a new venture. These were threads, like the crumbs that had betrayed young Tommy's theft. Vance's ambition, she thought, was a fire that might burn through loyalty, and his presence at the hotel, however briefly, placed him near the scene. She would need to confirm his alibi at the club, and to learn more about those clay samples in his office. With her knitting tucked away, and her thoughts as sharp as a St. Mary Mead dawn, Miss Marple rose, ready to share her findings with Sir Henry, and to weave the next thread in the mystery of the vanished explorer's map. Chapter 11. The trap is set. The fog had settled over London like a conspirator's cloak, muffling the clatter of the docks and casting the Anchor Hotel in a ghostly haze as Miss Jane Marple stood across the street, her black coat blending with the evening shadows. The hotel's sagging sign creaked in the damp air, and the faint glow of gas lamps illuminated the alley where the thief had fled with Captain Thorne's map. Miss Marple's sharp blue eyes, undimmed by the gloom, surveyed the scene with the quiet intensity of a gardener inspecting her beds for signs of disturbance. Her mind, as clear as a St. Mary Mead morning, was fixed on the plan she had devised with Sir Henry Clithering. A trap to catch a thief, not unlike the time she'd left a marked shilling in her parlour to snare a pilfering maid. The idea had come to her after her second meeting with Edward Vance, whose slip about Lady Beatrice's visit and unease over the red clay had sharpened her suspicions. His ambition, she thought, was like Mr. Ellison's in St. Mary Mead, a man whose charm masked a hunger for gain that led him to swindle his neighbours. The clay, confirmed as matching the Pacific Island soil, pointed to someone with access to Thorne's samples or the island itself, and Vance's office, with its prominent map and clay-stained relics, placed him squarely in the frame. Yet Miss Marple knew that suspicion was not proof, and proof required a bolder step. She had proposed the plan to Sir Henry over tea in his Bloomsbury office, her knitting needles clicking as she outlined her thoughts. "Henry," she'd said, her voice soft but resolute, "people are like my roses. They bloom when tempted. If we let it be known that Captain Thorne has a duplicate map, hidden in his hotel safe, the thief may return to claim it. In St. Mary Mead, we once caught a thief by leaving a baited purse in the church vestry. I believe this will work much the same." Sir Henry, his eyes alight with admiration, had agreed. "A cunning plan, Jane. We'll spread the rumour through channels the suspects might hear. Vance's club, Lady Beatrice's social circle, Dr. Mortimer's museum contacts, and Harrow's old haunts by the docks. I'll have men watching the hotel, discreetly, of course." Now, as Miss Marple stood in the fog, her black handbag clutched tightly, she felt the familiar thrill of a puzzle nearing its solution. Sir Henry's men, plainclothes officers with the stealth of village gossips, were positioned in the alley and across the street, their presence betrayed only by the occasional glint of a cigarette. The rumour had been carefully planted. Captain Thorne, recovering at a friend's, had let slip to a dockside contact that a copy of the map was locked in the hotel safe, a precaution he'd taken before the theft. Miss Marple had ensured the story was plausible, knowing that greed, like envy in St. Mary Mead, would draw the guilty out of hiding. The clock in a nearby church struck midnight, its chimes muted by the fog, and Miss Marple's attention sharpened. She had spent the day reviewing Sir Henry's latest findings. Vance's alibi at his club was shaky, with members recalling him leaving early the night of the theft. Harrow's smuggling past included a knack for picking locks, though no recent activity tied him to London. Lady Beatrice's financial strain was confirmed by a discreet banker, suggesting her need for the treasure was pressing, and Dr. Mortimer's museum visit left a gap of time unaccounted for, enough to reach the hotel. The clay, however, remained the linchpin, and Miss Marple's thoughts kept returning to Vance's office, where Thorne's samples had left their mark. A shadow moved in the alley, and Miss Marple's heart quickened, though her expression remained serene. A figure, cloaked in a dark coat, slipped toward the hotel's side entrance, moving with the caution of a poacher in St. Mary Mead's woods. She signalled to Sir Henry's man nearby, a subtle tilt of her head, and watched as the figure paused, glancing about before climbing the fire escape toward room 12's broken window. The officers stirred, their movements silent but coordinated, closing in like villagers converging on a suspected thief. The figure reached the window, and Miss Marple's eyes narrowed as she recognized the silhouette. Edward Vance, his polished demeanor replaced by the furtive haste of a man driven by greed. He pried open the window, its frame still splintered from the first break-in, and slipped inside. Moments later, a muffled clatter echoed from the room, followed by a low curse. Sir Henry's men moved swiftly, entering through the side door and ascending the stairs, their footsteps soft but purposeful. Miss Marple followed at a discreet distance, her sensible shoes silent on the pavement, her mind recalling the time she'd waited in her garden to catch young Billy with stolen apples. She reached the corridor as the officers burst into room 12, their voices sharp in the stillness. "Edward Vance, stay where you are!" one shouted, and Miss Marple peered through the open door to see Vance frozen by the safe, a lockpick in his hand, his face pale in the gaslight. I was just checking," Vance stammered, his charm crumbling like a poorly baked scone. "Thought I'd make sure the safe was secure." Sir Henry, who had joined the officers, stepped forward, his expression stern. "A poor excuse, Vance. You heard the rumor about a duplicate map, didn't you? Couldn't resist coming for it." Vance's eyes darted to Miss Marple, who stood quietly in the doorway, her knitting tucked away but her gaze unwavering. "You," he said, his voice low with a mix of anger and realization, "you set this up." Miss Marple's smile was gentle, her tone soft. "In St. Mary Mead, Mr. Vance, we once caught a thief by leaving a marked coin in a drawer. You see, greed, like ambition, makes people careless. The clay on your shoes, the same as in Captain Thorne's room, betrayed you." Vance's face fell, and he slumped against the wall as an officer seized the lockpick. "It was mine as much as his," he muttered. "Reginald was stalling, wasting time. I needed that map to secure the deal. Lady Beatrice was ready to pull out, and I couldn't let it slip away." Sir Henry raised an eyebrow, glancing at Miss Marple. "So you attacked him?" "Stole the map." Vance's shoulders sagged, his confession spilling like tea from a cracked pot. "I didn't mean to hurt him badly, just meant to knock him out, take the map. I picked the lock, grabbed it, and got out through the window. The clay, I didn't notice it on my shoes, I thought I'd been careful." Miss Marple nodded, her thoughts on the village grocer who'd confessed to stealing flour when cornered. "Careful, Mr. Vance, but not careful enough. The map, where is it now?" "In my office," Vance said, his voice hollow, "hidden in a ledger. I was going to use it to start the expedition myself." Sir Henry signalled to his men, who led Vance away, his polished shoes scuffing the floor. Miss Marple stepped into the room, her eyes lingering on the safe, its lock untouched this time. The trap, she thought, had worked as surely as her baited purse in St. Mary Mead, drawing out the guilty with the lure of gain. As the fog thickened outside, Sir Henry turned to her, his expression one of awe. "You've done it again, Jane. The clay, the rumour. How did you know it was Vance?" Miss Marple's smile was serene, her hands folding neatly in her lap. "People, Henry, are much the same, whether in London or St. Mary Mead. Mr. Vance's ambition was too bright, like Mr. Ellison's schemes. The clay on his shoes, his slip about Lady Beatrice, his eagerness for a new venture. They all pointed to a man who couldn't wait. In my village, we learned to watch for such signs." Sir Henry chuckled, shaking his head. "You're a marvel, Jane. Let's get that map from his office and wrap this up." Miss Marple nodded, her thoughts already turning to the final pieces of the puzzle. The trap had been set, and the thief had been caught, but the map's recovery would seal the case. With her knitting safely stowed and her mind as sharp as ever, she followed Sir Henry into the night, ready to tie the last thread in the mystery of the vanished explorer's map. Chapter 12. The Resolution. The morning sun broke through the London fog, casting a pale light over Sir Henry Clithering's Bloomsbury office, where Miss Jane Marple sat in her familiar chair, her knitting needles silent for once, resting in her lap. The room, with its oak-panelled walls and the faint scent of pipe tobacco, felt almost like a second home, a place where the threads of the mystery had been woven into clarity. Before her on the polished desk lay the recovered treasure map, its brittle parchment carefully unfolded, its faded ink tracing a path to a distant Pacific horde. Captain Reginald Thorne stood by the window, his bandaged arm less stiff now, his weathered face a mix of relief and exhaustion. Sir Henry, his expression one of quiet triumph, leaned against the desk, while Miss Marple, her black handbag at her side, surveyed the scene with the serene satisfaction of a gardener whose roses had bloomed true. "Jane," Sir Henry said, his voice warm with admiration, "you've outdone yourself. The map recovered, the thief caught, Vance is in custody, and the case is closed. I'd like to hear how you pieced it together." Miss Marple's blue eyes twinkled behind her spectacles, her smile gentle but knowing. "It's no great mystery, Henry, when you understand people. They're much the same, you know, whether in St. Mary Mead or a London hotel. Mr. Vance's ambition was his undoing, just as Mr. Ellison's was when he swindled our village with his grand schemes. Shall I explain?" Thorne turned from the window, his hazel eyes fixed on her. "Please, Miss Marple, I want to know how you saw what I missed." She folded her hands, her voice soft but clear, as if recounting a village tale over tea. "It began with the clay, Captain Thorne. That red smudge in your hotel room, near the window, was like the mud on young Billy's shoes when he stole apples from my orchard. It matched the soil from your Pacific island, a place only you and Mr. Harrow had visited, or so it seemed. But you'd brought samples back, and Mr. Vance admitted to handling them in his office. That clay, I thought, was a clue that could not lie." Sir Henry nodded, his pen poised over a notepad, and it pointed to Vance. "Not at first," Miss Marple said, her tone measured. "All four had motives, you see. Mr. Harrow, the guide, was nervous, like Mr. Hodge, our poacher, when caught with stolen pheasants. His smuggling past suggested he might know locks, but his fear seemed more about hiding a smaller sin than stealing a map. Lady Beatrice, your funder, had the poise of Lady Ashton in my village, whose charity masked a need for control. Her financial strain made the treasure tempting, but her visit to the hotel was too open, too deliberate. Dr. Mortimer, your rival, burned with envy, like Miss Granger, who sabotaged a neighbour's marrows. Her shaky alibi at the museum gave her time to reach the hotel, but envy alone wasn't enough." Thorne's brow furrowed. "So why Vance?" Miss Marple's eyes softened, but her gaze was sharp. "Mr. Vance's ambition was brighter than the others, Captain. He was like Mr. Ellison, who charmed St. Mary Mead into a failing venture. His impatience with your caution, his slip about Lady Beatrice's visit, his unease when I mentioned the clay, these were signs like crumbs on a thief's shirt. His office with its map of the Pacific and those clay samples, placed him close to the island's soil. When we spread the rumor of a duplicate map in the hotel safe, I suspected he'd act. Greed, you see, makes people careless, just as it did in my village when a marked coin caught a thief. Sir Henry leaned forward, his eyes bright. The trap was brilliant, Jane. Vance walked right into it, trying to pick the safe. Miss Marple's smile was modest. It was a simple thing, Henry. People reveal themselves when tempted. Mr. Vance confessed to attacking you, Captain, and taking the map, driven by fear that you'd cut him out, or that Lady Beatrice would withdraw her funds. The clay on his shoes, unnoticed in his haste, betrayed him, as did his return to the hotel. Thorne shook his head, a mix of anger and relief in his voice. I trusted him, Miss Marple. We were partners for years. How could I not see it? Miss Marple's expression was kind, her voice gentle. Trust blinds us, Captain, as it did Mrs. Clement when her curate stole her teapot. Mr. Vance's charm was his shield, but his ambition was too great. He hid the map in his office ledger, planning to claim the treasure alone. Sir Henry gestured to the map on the desk. Found exactly where he said, tucked between pages of accounts. The police have it now. Safe for your next expedition, Thorne. Thorne's hand brushed the parchment, his fingers tracing its faded lines. I owe you, Miss Marple. This map, it's my life's work. Miss Marple's needles resumed their soft clicking, a sound that seemed to ground the room. You owe me nothing, Captain. I only saw what was there, as I do in St. Mary Mead. But what of the others? Mr. Harrow, Lady Beatrice, Dr. Mortimer. Sir Henry cleared his throat, flipping open his notepad. Harrow's nerves, as you suspected, Jane, came from a side venture. Smuggling artifacts from a previous trip, nothing to do with the map. He's confessed to the police, a minor charge. Lady Beatrice is clear. Her visit was about finances, and her wealth, though strained, didn't drive her to theft. Dr. Mortimer's envy was real, but her museum alibi holds for the critical hour, and she had no access to the clay. Miss Marple nodded, her thoughts on the village parallels that had guided her. Mr. Harrow's smuggling, I think, is like Mr. Hodges' poaching, a small sin that made him jumpy. I'd leave it to your discretion, Henry, whether to press charges. He's no danger now. Sir Henry smiled, making a note. I'll pass it along. You're too soft, Jane, but I trust your judgment. As Thorne gathered the map, his gratitude evident, Miss Marple rose, her black handbag in hand. I must return to St. Mary Mead, Henry. My roses need tending, and the village has its own small mysteries waiting. Sir Henry escorted her to the door, his voice warm. You've saved the day again, Jane. I'll call you when the next puzzle arises. Miss Marple's smile was serene, her mind already drifting to her garden and the quiet of her village. Do, Henry, but I suspect St. Mary Mead will keep me busy enough. She stepped into the Bloomsbury street, the fog lifting to reveal a clear sky. The case was closed, the map restored, and the thief unmasked, all through the simple clarity of human nature. As she hailed a taxi to Paddington Station, her knitting tucked safely away, Miss Marple felt the satisfaction of a puzzle solved. Her thoughts as bright as the roses awaiting her in St. Mary Mead, where the next mystery, however small, was never far away.